Now that we've dealt with creating a resume that'll appeal to the human element, we've got something else that we need to deal with, and that is electronic scanning. We're going to talk about in this chapter what the process of electronic scanning involves. We're going to look at the two screening scenarios, using keywords, how we can find those keywords, how to add the keywords properly, and then how to send or submit that resume, and then scanner-friendly paper resumes. We're going to look at how you can, if you have to actually print the resume out and submit it that way, I'm going to show you, not only do we send electronic resumes, but even a paper resume that is submitted will likely be converted to an electronic resume, and we need to do that in such a way that it will assist the hiring managers in locating us. I'll give you some tips for creating a scannable resume, and then we'll look at the recruiter's perspective and why things have moved in this direction. So first off, in our overview, I want to mention that about 2/3 of all medium and large corporations electronically scan the resumes that they receive. That is a pre-screening process, and it serves two purposes. The first is to get the submitted information into the company's HR database. This information is then used to help fill future job openings. So they want to have that on file anyway for, maybe it doesn't match something that they've got right now, but it might match something later on. The second thing for the electronic scanning is to identify the candidates that could potentially fill their current job openings. And that's usually done by programming a scanner software to pick up on resumes that contain specific key words. Now, the main thing that concerns us with this is that every resume that's submitted is going to be pre-scanned before it ever appears in the hands of an actual hiring manager or recruiter. That means we've got opportunity to be weeded out before a human sees, that wonderful layout and the eloquent speech that we gave in our executive summary. Fortunately, though, by understanding how the scanning process works, we can take that into account and substantially increase the chance of our resume being selected by the electronic scanner that's doing, the sorting. Let's look at the two screening scenarios that we've got here. Resumes are electronically screened in one of two ways. In the first scenario, a recruiter is filtering and examining resumes that are already in the database. Most of these resumes were obtained maybe from prior sourcing work. The purpose, though, of this type of screening is to find candidates that could potentially fill current job openings. They're looking for people who can fill a need that they have right then. In the second scenario, the recruiter is electronically just scanning resumes that were submitted maybe as the result of an employment ad or a job listing on the company's website. They're just getting a lot of resumes in, and the purpose of this scan is to get those resumes into their database so that they have them, for future reference. The scanning system that they're going to use utilizes a technology called optical character recognition, or OCR for short, and it actually reads the resume. So you send in a paper resume, it gets scanned, and then some software turns the text that is on your paper into real letters and real words that could be edited and searched for. The trick here is that a lot of people don't realize is that the OCR software is capable very easily of reading normal fonts, things like, Century Schoolbook and Times New Roman, Verdana, the fonts that I gave you in the last chapter. But it doesn't recognize, and in fact, it will completely skip over out of the ordinary fonts that are fancy, and also graphics. It skips over graphics. In fact, it assumes that fancy fonts are just graphics, and it completely ignores them. But after it does convert the document, every word that's in there is able to be searched or manipulated just as though it was text. Once a resume is in the database, then they're going to search for it, and they're going to use a variety of specific keywords. Here's how it works. Let's suppose that a recruiter's client company is looking for someone who is highly proficient in Excel. So they contact them and say, I need somebody that's proficient in Excel. The first thing the recruiter is going to do is search their existing database for keywords like Microsoft Excel, MS Excel, spreadsheets, Excel all by itself. The purpose of that search is to, they've got thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of resumes, and they need to reduce the list of potential candidates to something that's more manageable. So at that point, after the search, they've got a list of potential candidates that, have listed Excel in one form or another on their resume. The next step is to refine that search. Since they're looking for somebody, that's very proficient in Excel, then they might perform a secondary search that utilizes more technical terms, things that would be used by Excel developers. Like Visual Basic for applications, VBA, Excel macros, things like that, even Certified Microsoft Office Professional. Those secondary keywords are going to normally generate a list of resumes that's small enough to be, reviewed by hand. So the first search gets them a bunch of people that have listed Excel. The second search, they're going to be a lot more specific, and that's going to filter out a lot of people. But the trick here is they're not looking at any resume. They are typing in words, and the computer is filtering out people for them. So that is the key. Now, at this point, the list might be handed over to maybe an assistant just for them to give it a cursory view. And that's another reason that you want to have, your most important information in that first third of the resume. Once the assistant, though, has filtered out even more from the list, then the recruiter, they're going to go back and they might give it their own scan to identify, the resumes that they feel look promising. From there, the recruiter is going to select the best resumes and either call the candidates for, an interview, or they'll send the resumes on to their client's, hiring manager for them to look at. So it's obvious here that the resumes that contain appropriate and relevant keywords are the ones that are most likely going to make it through the electronic screening process. And we do that by using the correct keywords. Let's take a look at keywords. Keywords are basically, they're words or phrases that are used regularly in your industry, your profession, your daily activities. All those things have industry jargon or keywords. So keywords make up the jargon that effectively defines us. It unites groups of people with a common vocation. No matter what it is, whether it's a hobby or, again, a career, an industry, they've all got technical terms and methodologies that are used to separate them and segregate them. Keywords can be acronyms. They can be single words, alphanumeric components, or entire phrases. And the example that I used with Microsoft Excel, people that worked with Microsoft Excel spreadsheets are identified by keywords like Microsoft Excel, MS Excel, spreadsheets, Excel, Visual Basic, VBA, Excel macros. All these terms segregate them and put them into a category. And pretty much every occupation has keywords, things that separate them and define a group. And everybody within that group knows those keywords. That's what's important here. So how do we find those keywords? When you're getting ready to put your resume together, you're going to need to put forth a concerted effort to find those keywords. Make sure, don't assume that you already know all of them. You want to do a little bit of research here and find keywords that are appropriate for your occupation and for the specific position that you're applying for. Here's a few tricks that you can use to locate those kinds of words. Look for job postings and employment ads within your profession. Those postings are considered to be one of the best sources of important keywords. Employers list the skills that they're looking for. And chances are whoever is actually needing, somebody to fill that position, they know enough about it that they'll use industry terms or keywords. Talk to recruiters, industry representatives, people that work in the same field to identify emerging trends, identify industry buzzwords, again, that you might not be aware of. There could be a job that, let's say, requires, just like the example that we've given here, it requires proficiency in Excel, but maybe the job itself is more specialized and focused. You might be really good at Excel, but you might not consider yourself, within that specific niche that's utilizing Excel. So you want to do a little bit of research to find out any, keywords within that specific niche. Another good tool is to search monster.com and hotjobs.com to find relevant job descriptions. Search for keywords and terms that are used consistently across, a lot of the job listings that are showing up there. Scrutinize industry association websites for buzzwords, keywords that appear regularly. What you want to look for here is keywords that represent cutting-edge technologies and innovative business solutions. Their presence, if those keywords are there in your resume, that's going to distinguish you, in maybe a highly competitive field. You even want to take a look at websites that are peripherally associated with your occupation, like websites of business suppliers, customers, or even competitors. Those sites a lot of times will have overlooked keywords that are, very significant. And one thing that comes to mind here, let's say, skateboarding as a recreation or rollerblading, playing guitar, those kinds of things. So if you go to maybe Ibanez, who makes guitars, you go to their website and you find out about the lingo that they use within that industry. So you want to be familiar with anything that is, associated with your position. Also go to your local library, scan the table of contents and even the index of books that, again, are in your industry. If you're a Microsoft Access programmer, you want to go check out Microsoft Access books in the computer section in your library. Look at the table of contents, and you're going to find a ton of very significant keywords. If nothing else, it'll jog your memory. A lot of times we are capable of doing something. We have a lot of experience in doing it, but we are so involved in it that we don't think to utilize that terminology. So going through that list, in the table of contents or in the index in the back of a book, that can kind of jog our mind to say, oh yeah, I need to use that term. And lastly, don't forget that we did a lot of resume reconnaissance work. No doubt you found some keywords there. Make sure that you use those in your resume. But how do you use them? You can't obviously just, have a huge list that's just a paragraph full of keywords. Well, first of all, you want to highlight the most important words that are in your keyword list, because by now you have probably accumulated quite a list of keywords. Highlight the ones that are most important, and if you possibly can, find somebody, maybe a friend or an associate that's in your industry, and have them check out the list and, offer recommendations on what is most important. But now comes the real hard part, because like I said, you can't just have a paragraph full of keywords. This is not like, Google advertising pay-per-click or anything like that. You need to format that so that it's, makes sense for people that will be reading it. It needs very much to appear natural. It needs to be integrated. You've got your keyword section, at the top of the first page of your resume, but you're not going to be able to get all of your keywords into that section. And I'm talking about the section that's right below your executive summary. It's within that first top half of the first page. The best keywords that you could pick will successfully identify you as belonging to a unique group. That list of keywords included in your resume needs to be comprehensive enough to, ensure that you're not excluded from that group. On the other hand, too many keywords is going to waste very valuable resume space, so you don't want to do that. So you don't want a huge long list that is just keywords. That's going to, make your resume look congested and very unprofessional. Traditionally, one of the best places to put your keywords is in your accomplishment section. That particular section is not only the most noticeable section, but it's also deliberately designed to showcase your best skills and your principal achievements. Let's take a look at an example. A good resume is going to always have keywords in the executive summary, and I've got those bold here so that they stand out. And then it has even the same keywords. Notice this. The same keywords are in my keywords section here below the executive summary. You might kind of tweak them a little bit. You might word them a little bit differently, but it needs to appear in both of those sections. So now we know we need keywords in our resume. Okay, we know where to put them. We know how to look for them, locate the keywords that we're going to use, and we know we've got to integrate them so that they make sense to the human beings that will eventually be reading these resumes. But how do we actually send the resume once we put it all together? Well, the first rule is you definitely want to submit it in whatever format the company or the recruiter has requested. So conform to whatever they ask for. If you're given the choice, though, you want to include the text of your resume in the body of an email, not, as an attachment. You want to put it in the body because that will make it easier for them to do what they need to do on their end. And not everybody uses the same programs. You might be using Microsoft Word 2007, and they might be using, WordPerfect or something, and it's an older version, and it can't read Word 2007 documents or whatever. So to put it in the body makes it a little bit easier for them. And most email programs let you select the font that you're going to use for the email message. And if that's the case, use a sans serif font. With printed documents, a serifed font with the little curlies and the lines and all that stuff usually makes it easier to read, and it kind of guides, the eye. But on the computer screen, sans serif fonts are usually easier to read. As a general rule, I recommend using Verdana over Arial because with Arial, the capital I looks just like a lowercase l. And the problem with that is if you're, the keyword that you're using, if it has a capital I in it and the computer accidentally or incorrectly specifies that as an L, then whenever somebody does whenever they search for your keyword, guess what? Yours isn't going to come up because the computer interpreted it wrong and it put the wrong letter in there. With Verdana, the capital I is an exception. Verdana is a sans serif font, but the capital I, they did put serifs on it to distinguish it from the lowercase l. So I recommend going with, and I've actually used these two fonts here in the examples so you can see the difference. Now, if you submit your resume by either faxing it or mailing it, a physical paper, it is most likely, at least with the medium and large size companies, it is going to be scanned by OCR software at some point. The problem is that typically OCR-based scanners are notoriously lousy for scanning resumes as far as their accuracy. Anything unusual can totally throw them off, like double columns, unusual typefaces, hyphens even, typos, tables, boxes, misspellings, all that kind of stuff can totally mess up the scanning process. If the scanner is going through there and it runs into something that it doesn't think is a letter, then it just blows it away. And that can make, that can give you bad results when somebody's trying to look for a keyword term. Because that, remember, is the whole purpose of what they're trying to do, is to get your resume scanned in so that they can search for keywords. They've got a ton of resumes that they've got to go through. So they want to be able to type some keywords and find all the resumes that match that. If your resume is scanned and for whatever reason that word, that keyword that you've got in there, if it's not correctly detected by that OCR software, then you're in trouble because it's not going to show. So if possible, I always recommend submit your resume in an electronic format. If you have to do an attachment, this is real easy to do. Most of the time in a word processor, when you save it, go ahead and save it in whatever the native format is with your fonts and all that kind of stuff. But the safest thing for you to do is after you're done, click File and click Save As. And that usually allows you to specify a different format. And you can specify ASCII text. ASCII text is plain text, meaning there's no markups for font or size or anything like that. It's just the raw computer text. It looks, if you were to open up a document that is just ASCII text, it looks a lot like what you would see with a typewriter. Now, it doesn't look beautiful to the human eye, but it goes into a computer real easy, and that makes it a very simple process for them to put it into their database, and that's what's the most important thing. A lot of recruiters, HR personnel, they prefer that, again, because it is so easy to get it into their database. What's very similar to that is if you, just copy and paste your resume into the body of your email. That's another thing that makes, the whole process a lot easier. They don't have to worry about, viruses or not being able to open it because it's not a compatible document, conflicts like that. They don't have to worry about that. So avoid, sending your resume as an attachment. The other real big advantage to this method is that it's smaller messages, meaning you can send a lot of messages in a very short amount of time. Now, if you do this, let's say you've got a whole list of addresses that you want to send your resume to. You do not want to use CC or carbon copy in your email program. You want to use BCC, which is blind carbon copy. The difference here is that with a CC, everybody who gets the email sees all of the addresses, the other recipients that were also sent the document. With a blind carbon copy or BCC, it does not show them that. It only shows their email address, so they don't know who else got the document. The reason that's important is because they don't want to feel like they're just one of several companies that you're sending your resume to. They need to feel that you really want to work for them. So you kind of make them feel special, if you send a specific email to them. The alternative to that is to just, create a generic email that you're going to be sending out, but that you can customize and paste that into each email and send them individually. So that's electronic documents and how you can submit things electronically. What if you absolutely have to send a paper resume and a paper cover letter? A lot of companies will request that. Now, the thing is, you don't know for sure if they're going to be scanning it or not. Maybe someone from HR is going to personally take a look at every one of them. Or maybe it's just going to come to somebody in a stack of papers on their desk and they're going to get all scanned in. You don't know. So you've got to make sure that that resume is scanner friendly, because remember, this can be the critical point here that determines if your resume is going to, meet the cut. You got to make sure you use standard fonts, Times New Roman, Century, Verdana, things that the computer can scan easily. No fancy fonts at all. At this point, if they're going to scan, seriously, it's in the computer's hands. The computer is going to decide whether your, resume gets filtered out or not. So here are some tips to making your resume, scannable by computers so that they can recognize the words and ensure that those keywords get logged accurately. Use white or light-colored paper, 8.5 by 11, and only print on one side. Don't do a double-sided deal. A lot of times they'll miss that. They won't even scan the second side. Provide a clean, computer-generated original document. That doesn't mean you can't use a real good, high-quality photocopy. You can, but you got to check. If you go to Kinko's or Staples or something, you've got to check see a sample of what they've done and how it's going to look. It needs to be nice. You can't have, the black lines across it and, blotchy spots and all that kind of stuff, because that can throw the computer off. Don't use a dot matrix printer. And again, don't give them low quality prints. Don't fold or staple your resume. Again, this is review, but I got to stress this. Use standard fonts. Don't get fancy on them. Use fonts in the sizes 10 to 14 points. And remember with that, don't use Times and Century at 10 points, because at that size it makes it a little more difficult to read them. Use boldface and or capital letters for section headings, as long as those letters don't touch each other. Sometimes when we bold a font, they widen up and they run into each other. Avoid that, because that OCR software, if it's specifically looking for letters that are, it knows the format of how letters are supposed to be. And if the letters are touching one another, it considers that a big graphic, and it's not going to index it. Stay away from vertical and horizontal lines, graphics of any sort, and boxes, and try not to underline anything. Stay away from the 2-column format, and again, text boxes. You don't want any graphical element. You want everything to be actual letters. Avoid using italics. Use it very sparingly, because a lot of times the OCR software, the accuracy is not real good on italics. They are literally looking for words, letters, just like what you're seeing on the screen right now. And any deviation from that, it makes it difficult, for the computer to determine if one letter matches what their pattern is. And that's really how these software programs work. They have a specific pattern of what, a G is supposed to look like, or what an A is supposed to look like. And if your A does not match that pattern, then it either messes up and calls it something else, or it skips it and assumes that it's a graphic. Only use standard bullet points in any graphics that you do need to use. That means like the bullet points that you see here that are just, a round bullet point. Stick with that. Don't do any of that fancy kind of, swirly stuff that a lot of the word processors can do. Just standard bullet points. Use industry jargon and, by all means, descriptive nouns and verbs. You can kind of sprinkle those nouns and verbs through your descriptions. Those can be additional things that people might be searching for. Let's look at this from the recruiter's perspective. You might be wondering, you kind of want to have that personal feel that a human being, what I have told you in this chapter might discourage you. It might be discouraging because you didn't realize that a computer was going to be looking at your resume before a human being does. But on a normal day, a typical recruiter gets over 1,000 resumes per job opening. And that's in addition to the regular resumes that they just get all the time. They could have 50 resumes come into their office every single day if it's a pretty good sized company. So they've really, this is the only way that they could possibly go through that volume of resumes. And usually, looking at resumes is not the only thing they've got to do. They've got, their regular tasks that they've got to take care of. So they're only going to spend a small portion of their time every day looking at stuff like this. And they have got to somehow deal with that list and get it narrowed down to the people that they then are going to give personal attention to. So the electronic part of all of this is cold and ruthless. They're going to put your paper in there, it's going to get scanned, and the computer is going to take care of the rest. And then they want to, they're just going to type in some search words, and either your resume comes up or it doesn't. So because of the volume here, they're basically forced to doing electronic screening like this just to make that, incredible amount of resumes manageable. What that means is that undoubtedly there will be people that are qualified, highly qualified for a specific job, but they will get totally passed over because their resume was not optimized and laid out for this high-tech electronic scanning process. That's what I want you to be able to do, is format your resume so that, yes, it's good visually, but it's got what it needs also. It's prepared for the inevitable electronic screening process. If you've done your homework right on this, your resume is going to come up when they're searching for those terms. All right, we're ready to move on, and up next, I'm going to show you how to deal with biases, including gender biases, racial biases, even your name and the layout of your resume.